Welcome to episode 151 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast about using, learning and sharing our passion for Linux and open source, whether you're a noob or a master sudoer. Welcome. I'm Zeb, and with me today are the recent cyber deal best buys of Linux, Noah and Ryan. But we just missed out on the last deal, and I ended up with having to buy Michael as well. So there you go.
Oh gosh, he's back.
I know. So Noah, how's your week been?
It's been good. It's been good. Getting ready for Christmas and doing a lot of things. And my project for this week, if you caught the last episode of the Ask Noah show, which anybody who is anybody has, knows that I'm working on privacy-aware IP cameras. And so this is my new TP-Link 16-port PoE switch. It's a managed switch that provides PoE to the cameras, $140 off of Amazon. And so this is going to be completely separated from the rest of my network. So there's going to be no physical connection for these cameras to the outside world. And it'll exist inside of its little own secure net thing. And of course, because the traffic itself is encrypted, and of course, because the NVR that I'm going to be using will be encrypted, essentially everything's encrypted. And so I feel pretty good about that. And so that's going to be my project this next coming week. And when I find some time, and I'll report back and let you know. But I think the answer is to use technology and continue to use all of the smart devices, but just pick smart devices that are not so smart and don't have to be on the internet to work. And then you get all the convenience of modern technology without any of the privacy invasive cloud-based subscription-based crap.
Well, I think what's so great about this in the recent episodes of Ask Noah Show is that it's been very timely for me. This is something I have a particular interest in, having the security, but also having the security of not having this device being something that other people access, get into that's private. And you are doing all this research. You are looking into all of this equipment, tons and tons of research going into every single company, finding out where their ties in, how are they going into this? How are they making their money? What's their business model? What's their encryption? And you're going into all of this with the audience. So everybody kind of gets to go along the journey with you, which is incredible. And also, I don't have to do any research because I could just listen to what you say to buy it and hook it up myself. So no, but if you haven't been listening lately, definitely check out Ask Noah Show, because I think this is a topic everybody's interested in. These solutions you're buying off the shelf you see it in the news every single week. They're not private. People are breaking into them. They're watching you and your families in your homes. They're doing this to your smart TVs. They're doing this to these camera packages you buy off the shelf. It's a real problem, and Noah is doing the research to give a real solution to it. So it's an awesome subject.
I appreciate it.
Excellent. So, Michael, tell us about your week.
Well, I've been doing quite a bit. I'm actually going to be working on some new graphics for the show, and that does include changing some OBS stuff.
Gosh!
In fact, I'll be consolidating and removing quite a few scenes. So there we go.
How many scenes will we be down to?
I have no idea. It will probably be less than that, but not much less than that.
So at least closer to 150.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be somewhere between 150 to 1,050. So somewhere in there. But
that's good.
That's good. But actually, I would like to point out that the monitor arm is no longer on the bookshelf. And yes, I actually did install it. I didn't just move it like I should have done as a joke. But I did actually install it this weekend. So I now have a 3-monitor setup. One of them is now vertical, so that changes the layout and doing this show actually makes it a lot easier having that third monitor. It took 3 hours to install the monitor arm, and that might seem ridiculous. And yes, it normally would be ridiculous. The reason it took that long is it was like 30 minutes for the actual monitor arm setting up the monitor. It took me about 2.5 hours to do the cable management. Because the cable management is like, that shouldn't be ridiculous either, but I have a sit-stand desk that goes up and down, so I have to make it where I can manage the cables, yet also have them flexible. And when I didn't have the monitor arm, I didn't bother with the management of it, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But it took so much time to manage it just to make sure that the cables didn't get like ripped out of the computer when it goes up and down. So I learned how to make a weird cable management solution in a sit-stand desk. And it's kind of fun. My solution was also kind of silly, but I like it because it works quite well. I took a cargo net that you get in like an SUV, and that is what's holding the wires underneath the desk.
So do we get him to show us this working in real life without his monitor going?
Yes, I will actually prove that it works, and I will show like the net and everything. I'll make a video of it or whatever. And
so for the 3.5 Michael Tunnell fans out there listening right now, how long did it take from getting the monitor stand until you installed it? What is the official timestamp here?
I didn't.
How many OBS scenes did you require?
Well, the scenes were actually fine. We only needed 3 for that, but 1 per hour of the work. So I don't know exactly how long it took for me to get it. We can look to see.
Is it weeks or months? Are we thinking here?
It's only a few weeks. Like I estimated it would only take a month, but it only was 3 weeks. So
wow, so you're ahead of schedule.
Yes, exactly. I'm actually I'm ahead of schedule, and I also was consistent with the 3s. It took 3 hours and 3 OBS scenes and 3 weeks to set it up.
There you go.
Excellent. So Ryan, what's new in your world?
So if you remember a few episodes back, I discussed this Ryzen build that we could not get working, which has bugged me for over a month until our next lug event, which happened this Sunday, to get back to this machine to see if we could get Linux to work on this computer. And there were probably many issues that were going on with this machine. We did another BIOS update when they brought it back in, and still could not get Linux to boot. We tried several different distributions again. We were going through kind of backtracking through all the steps we had done before to figure why will this thing boot into Windows every time, but will not boot a single Linux distribution. I'd love to sit here and tell you, and we all laughed at the lug event to figure out ways I could spin this, that I figured this out, but I was not the one who figured it out finally. A individual by the name of Zach in the group decided to randomly pull the SATA cable from the Blu-ray drive and swap the SSD positions. So we did do this before. We did change the cables for the SSD drives. We did unplug different drives, but we did not try them in a far enough away slot from the controller. So let me explain. What we found out is this motherboard has 2 controllers in it. One of those controllers is on the X570 motherboard itself. The other one is a separate ASMedia ASM 1061 controller that controls SATA ports 1 and 2. That controller, we believe, is not recognized by Linux. It does not have driver support for it in the kernel. And therefore, anything plugged into SATA 1 and 2 would not boot. Anything plugged into any of the other SATA ports, which are controlled by the X570 motherboard itself, would boot fine. So as soon as we removed it, everything boots. Linux is working. Mission accomplished. So huge thank you to Zach for figuring that out. If anyone is having a similar issue, this is on the MSI A Pro X570 motherboard that we had it at, but it's something to consider with any motherboard that is running multiple controllers, that one of those may not be officially supported by Linux out there. So we finally got this machine to work. They're on Linux. We're so happy about it finally. So a huge success finally on that machine. So all of those who've been sending in their suggestions and comments after that, that was the fix for it.
Excellent. So quick question from our patrons. Have you updated the Arch Wiki yet?
You know what? I need to get in there and do that because I have a shirt that says I edit the Arch Wiki. So therefore I have to kind of make it a reality since I wear it, right? So Zeb, what have you been up to this weekend?
Well, I've actually been busy testing the Peppermint 10 respin. As usual, I can't give away any other information.
Oh, come on. Just a little bit.
It's got Carl's wallpaper on it. There you go.
Nice.
What a shocker. Yeah. So from the very first ISO, it's been rock solid with some very neat little tweaks and additions. So check it out on a USB stick near you soon-ish, maybe, but better than Michael time for sure.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Awesome.
I should be offended by better than Michael time, but I mean, it's fair. Totally fair.
This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and so much more. You get all of this plus access to their world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month. Or you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. Now, as Ryan would say, that's darn near free. DigitalOcean also offer over 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials to help stay up to date with the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. So you can get started on DigitalOcean for 1 month free with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. Once again, you can get started with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. And we thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode.
Bonito writes in to say, hi there, Destination Linux crew. First off, I love your show and thank you for all the hard work you put in. To make this show what it is, I look forward to every single episode of DL. Now, I have 2 questions for you guys. 1, I know Ryan uses Ubuntu and Arch.
What?
Ryan uses Arch and he makes it very clear in every episode.
No, I do not. That's ridiculous.
No, I guess he does use Ubuntu. I know Michael uses Kubuntu. And to Zeb and Noah, which distro do you guys use as your daily drivers? Well, I guess we'll just take it as we go. So, Zeb, what distro do you use as your daily driver?
Well, it's the one with the big red
Arch.
peppermint logo on it. So I use Peppermint OS. It's based upon Ubuntu. And there's a wonderful guy called Mark Greaves who manages it. And he just grabs all of the components from the various distros around, melds them together in a wonderful, lightweight, quick, reliable, rock-solid Ubuntu derivative. So, yeah, I use Peppermint OS.
I have a workstation that is kind of like, it's like my computer. It's not where I do work. It's like the most static, most stable computer in my life. And that machine has run Fedora since Fedora Core 1 and probably will run Fedora forever. And then apart from that, if I just have I need to grab an install and just install something, it's Kubuntu if I'm using it. If it's a machine that is a utilitarian machine, like it's sitting in the server room and I just need it to, look stuff up, or if I need a spare machine with a UI to run a piece of software, that's usually Ubuntu. And the reason that I heavily base those things off of the Ubuntu base is because that's what most clients, most customers, and most other individuals are going to be using. And if I was going to recommend a distro to somebody else, that's what I would recommend to them. So I try to keep my core competency in that Ubuntu land. But I have a soft spot I'm a Fedora guy at heart. What can I say? He continues and says, do you have any suggestions for remote desktop software on Linux that is open source? I've tried TeamViewer, AnyDesk, but would love any open source solution that replaces proprietary solutions. What do you guys use for remote support on the desktop? Looking forward to hearing you in the next show. Greetings from Namibia. So as far as if you want there's really only one good open source remote control software if you don't want to have the hassle of setting up VPN stuff. If you can handle setting up VPN stuff and you're able to tunnel your traffic, then you can start using things like VNC. But if you want really good, robust remote software, there's only one that I'm aware of that's open source, and that's X2Go. And the thing that's nice about X2Go is it tunnels over the SSH protocol, and so you get a secure environment by default. Additionally, because of the way that X Server is set up, you have X Server and you have X Client, and because we can separate those two things, back in my day, we would do something called X11 forwarding, and essentially you establish an SSH connection with X11 forwarding enabled. And what that allows you to do is when you type Firefox, instead of launching a local Firefox window on the remote side or on the local side, it launches that Firefox window on the remote side. So the back end, all of the files that Firefox is loading from is happening on the far side, on the server side, and on the client side, it's actually where that window's being drawn. So you get a local feeling application that's actually conducting network traffic and performing its tasks on the remote end. What X2Go is, it's the next evolution of that particular implementation of an ability to remotely control a workstation, which is there's now a client, and you open up X2Go client, you click on the workstation you want to connect to, and it does all the magic in the background, and all of a sudden you're presented with a full-on desktop. Now, it's an open source solution, it's a secure solution, it works very well, it's fairly robust. However, it does require control over the network stack because you do have to forward ports, which also means that you need a static internal IP address, and you have to have NAT enabled and configured properly to to handle remotely connecting in. So if you have control over the network stack, you want something completely open source, X2Go is the way to go. If you want to get, if you're okay budging a little bit on that open source side, I looked at TeamViewer. I tried TeamViewer. Obviously, we have a lot of experience with TeamViewer because it's prevalent in the IT world, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is, first of all, that daemon for TeamViewer is always running as root, even on the client side, the thing that you're connecting into, and that is concerning to me, to say the least. But the other thing is, it's not very featureful. There's not a lot of features there. And so what I've always recommended to people is a software called Simple Help. And Simple Help it's not open source software. It is proprietary. However, it runs on Linux. It's self-hosted, so it's not a perpetual fee. You pay one time and you own it forever. If you want to pay for software maintenance, you're welcome to do so. And then you get updates. If you don't, it'll just continue to run. The thing that, to me, makes Simple Help stand out is the fact that you have so many more features. So, for example, first, there is access control lists. And so you can go in and say, on this system, all these machines are enrolled into my Simple Help server, and so I have access to all these. But John only gets access to these 3 machines. Michael only gets access to the OBS machine to create his scenes. Ryan, we trust him, so he gets access to everything. And you can define granular controls. Additionally, there's a wide feature set and tool set that's available. So anytime I click on a machine, I see things like the host name, the current status. Is it in use? When was the last time it was in use? Are there any required restarts to complete updates for Windows operating systems? What operating system is it running? What's the last response time that it checked into the server? What services are running? What ports are open? What IP addresses are assigned to the NICs? All that information is available without even having to dig in or connect to the machine. That's just information that's presented right away. Simply having the WAN IP address of a machine can be so incredibly helpful in troubleshooting. When you go into the hardware details, you can see things like the model number, the serial number, the service tag. If it's a Dell machine, it tells you the processor, what's installed in the machine, how much RAM is in there, how much is being used, how much disk space is free. Those kinds of things, if you're me and you're managing workstations for other people, that's information you just can't live without. It also tells me all of the apps that are installed, the customer details. And again,
you're going on like Michael does about KDE here.
Yeah, it's one of those things, the tools that you use every day to get your job done, you get passionate about them. And so the ability to create like virtual network tunnels and stuff, it's just, I don't have enough good things to say about Simple Help. The only bad thing is it's not open source. So if you're looking for if you want good remote support software, go with X2Go. If you want the best remote support software, give Simple Help a shot.
Now, why not something like for simpler, because I don't know what their use case here. Obviously, you look at this from a business perspective, managing small, large networks and those type of things. If they're just looking to do some things in their home, perhaps Remina or something along those lines. Have you played with any of those?
Remina is just a client wrapper. So Remina doesn't really do anything in and of itself. It's like saying I use QMMP for streaming media. I mean, the QMMP is just the client application that streams the media. It's actually, an IceCast stream that's sitting underneath it. And so, you can use Remina there's XRDP. And so you could use, it's the RDP implementation under X, but as you might expect, when you take a Microsoft thing and try and hack it together on Linux, it works about as you would expect it would. Again, you can use things like VNC, but remember, you have to have tunneling technology underneath it because it's not encrypted by default.
Gotcha.
And so if you had that tunneling technology, then you could use something like Remina. But I really, if you want something open source, I really have to say stick with X2Go. It's really the best out there.
Okay, awesome. So an anonymous user writes in and says, "Hi, I'm just wondering if you can help me and everyone else who might have the same concern as me. I have a MacBook Pro 2019, which is very good hardware, 32 gigabytes of RAM, 8 cores, touch bar. I'm not sure if you'd consider that good or bad. It's good. I can't open it up and fix it as I'm not sure if I will be able to put it back together again afterwards." That's one way of looking at it. The problem with all the good hardware is that it's Mac OS driving it underneath, and this makes him mad the whole time. He wants Linux where you would be in control, but haven't found any ISO that can just put on a USB and it will just work. I figured out the secure boot chip already. So for those who don't know, my MacBook has put what they call T-chip into their new line of computers, which has kept many of these machines, although some people have hacked around and been able to work around it. A lot of them still are not working with anything Linux on it. So I've seen some sort of Arch kernel for MacBook, and kernel 5.3 has support for the Apple keyboard. But while I have installed it inside VMware Fusion, to do it on a real computer will be a bigger challenge, as I don't want to brick my Mac. Nice show. I like the idea of the job board, and he's talking about on our Discourse forums, which if you haven't checked out, you need to go check out. That's where you get all the content and all the shows where discussions and things are happening on our destinationlinux.network. Check out the Discourse forum. We put up a job board as well because there's a lot of folks in the community who are looking for work. So if you know of jobs and that your company's hiring, you can put it there. Also, if you need help with your resume and things like that, we have sections like that there for you. So interesting question. I have recently been playing with and repairing MacBooks for some friends, as well as playing with some MacBooks that have some older ones. The issue with this question is, and the problem with Mac is, it used to be you could get a Mac had one of the only computers that had the aluminum unibody, that kind of beautiful feeling, aesthetically pleasing laptop that they have, but that is no longer the case. That was one of the primary reasons a lot of people wanted a MacBook. It also used to be that MacBook, especially with the Air, had one of the thinnest and most portable laptops out there. And that was a big reason for people like me who are travelers that I have to bring a work computer that's thick and obnoxious, and I don't want another thick and obnoxious computer to put in my backpack to pull out at TSA. So the Air made sense, but that's no longer the case as well. The PineBook Pro, for instance, that I took on the trip is just as thin or as close to it as possible. And there are other Dells and other machines out there that are just as thin as well. So this thing that Apple had in the past that kind of made them unique in the market is no more. And in fact, I would say most of the companies out there like Dell are surpassing MacBooks in their aesthetics. For instance, the Infinity screen is a perfect example of something that has just completely, in my book, wiped out any of the advantage that MacBook had. It's just this, it's so beautiful to have no bezel on your screen. And what I'm getting at is, you bought a MacBook that has one purpose, and Apple is doing a tremendous disservice to the community by continuing this, because by the way, they only support their products from between going through their entire history, 4 and 6 years. You spent a massive amount of money to get this MacBook that you have here. And in 4 to 6 years, you're not going to be able to get on the latest Mac OS anymore. It's going to be deprecated. You have almost no ability with their T-chip to work around the Linux and get Linux or other operating systems on it. So it's complete e-waste. My recommendation, honestly, to you, and this is somebody who's had MacBooks, repairs MacBooks, you know my history with this, is sell this thing. If it's past, you can't take it back anymore, and get a different machine. There is nothing Mac has out right now in the laptop market that has any reason to keep it above going out and buying a Dell. I got the new Lenovo Flex 14, by the way, in this week. It is so incredibly beautiful, and you can flip it over and turn it into a tablet, and you can draw on it, and the hardware is just gorgeous, and you can put Linux on it. So there's no reason to have a MacBook. Worst case scenario, sell it on eBay, get as much money back as you can for it, and you could probably afford a far more powerful machine and one that you can customize without going through this headache of trying to figure out if Linux can work on it. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that there's really no solution for people having like the latest MacBook, because Apple's doing as much as possible to make it difficult to even get it to boot, much less also having a touch bar. So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah, and no ports. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, no ports and a touch bar. Whereas,
I think you now get like 3 USB-C, so that's something. You'll need it for a micro SD card or anything else.
The wonderful world of Apple dongles.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
So we love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send us a short email or a video that will get incorporated into the show. Send your video links or emails to comments@destinationlinux.org. When we launched the Destination Linux Network, we also wanted to partner with our growing community to find ways we could give back. So we put up a post on our Discourse forum and asked the community to provide us feedback on the charities you would like us to work with. FreeGeek was highly recommended by many of you, and we're so excited to partner with them and launch our first Giving Back campaign. FreeGeek's mission is to substantially reuse technology and enable digital access and education to the community. The best part is they have many ways for everyone to get involved. So to kick us off, we would like to welcome Hilary Shohoney to the show. Hilary is a FreeGeek's manager of development and manages the relationships between FreeGeek and the local community, working on issues like the digital divide. Hilary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. We're really thankful to be a part of this.
No, that sounds great. And we're really pleased that you've agreed to work with us. So let's start off by learning a little bit about you. How did you first get involved with FreeGeek?
Yeah, so years ago, about 10 years ago now, I had left my corporate job at Microsoft and decided that I wanted really badly to get into nonprofits. And I joined a nonprofit, and just like most nonprofits, they struggled for money. And I had no computer at work, and I was biking back and forth to work with my laptop in my bike bag, which is a terrible decision. Of course, I fell, broke my laptop, then had no personal computer and no work computer.
Oh my gosh.
And we had this really lovely volunteer who let me know that FreeGeek would grant us technology. And within a couple of weeks after hearing that, I received my first FreeGeek grant. And then I received many other FreeGeek grants in the next 8 years at other nonprofits. And I also went in and purchased my own personal computer at a really, really reasonable rate from the store and fell in love with FreeGeek then. Then I saw, obviously, the job posting and knew that it was meant for me. So
very nice. So the digital equity, or what some refer to as the digital divide, is a growing concern that we're hearing a lot more about, which is a good thing in the communities. According to your website, for instance, 17% of the US population alone does not have access to a computer, and they don't have access to a phone. And there are things that companies like FreeGeek are doing that contribute to that. But before we started the interview, you were telling us this personally hit you, like you were talking about here, in that you had no computer anymore. And if you think about getting a job today, if you think about doing research to submit your resume, every single thing is done online. And so that makes it nearly impossible for those who don't have access to something like that to be able to apply to jobs, to be able to afford to get the technology, to be able to get a job that would allow them to. So it's kind of a cycle that continues to go round and round. And I'm really interested in this because I think this is one of the things that FreeGeek does that's quite amazing. Is how does FreeGeek help bridge that divide?
Yeah, so when we think about the digital divide, there are multiple kind of components or tiers to the bridge that kind of hold it up. So one of them obviously is internet access. And FreeGeek tries to connect with local providers to find low-cost internet options for folks who would qualify for them. But the kind of most notable thing that we do is we help provide a device. So we have a lot of opportunities to get free computers through a number of programs. Some of them require no qualification at all. And others are specifically targeted to populations who don't have access to a device or the knowledge to use it. The other thing that we provide is education. So we have a classroom on site, but we also do off-site education. And we provide about 4,000 hours of community ed a year for free to the community. And then above and beyond that, every computer that we sell in our store has 6 months of tech support. So if you have a computer, it breaks, you can't use it, it's not really of much, has no purpose anymore. So what we try to do is provide that, tech support. But then if you're granted or given a free computer from FreeGeek, you get a full year of tech support. And I know that our wonderful tech support staff will actually step up and help a lot of folks even beyond that. So it's a really amazing kind of wraparound program to try to get people the services and devices that they need so that they can fully participate in the digital economy.
That's awesome.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some misconceptions you hear about the digital divide, like just in the, dealing with people who are just learning about FreeGeek and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there are a number of misconceptions that I hear. The most prevalent, I think, is that now that we all have smartphones, the digital divide doesn't matter. I think that is a really big misconception. One, it's really hard to type a paper for school on a cell phone. It's really difficult to do a lot of things on a cell phone, and we meet people every single day, and that is their experience.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a misconception that if you suddenly, get a device and have the internet, you're now digitally connected. We have a lot of folks who just need access to the knowledge and folks to help them use their device. So you can't just do one thing and solve the problem. It really has to be about providing a full service experience for folks so that they feel like they're included. And I don't know how many people that we meet that say, oh, I've had this computer for 10 years. I've never used it. Especially seniors. We have a lot of folks who really are digitally divided. And the other thing that I hear is in certain areas that are more affluent, that it's not a problem. I would say that it's an even bigger problem because in order to participate in, say Portland, where I'm located, you have to, as you were saying, have access to a computer to type a resume. You have to know how to type. You have to know how to use a mouse. You have to know all of these things in order to get just a basic job. And many, many people are lacking in these skills.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. The misconception, I've worked with several organizations around the digital divide. And one of the misconceptions I hear a lot is that it's not a problem in the United States. So people do not think that this impacts the United States. And, maybe they live in a more affluent area and they don't see it. But I can tell you in working with some kids and getting them access to computers that it changes their life. Because prior to that, they're given homework assignments that their only option is there's libraries are too far away. There's no bus routes to get them to a library. And their only option is to take old encyclopedias to try to look up information in order to do their homework. And think about what a disadvantage that is to a child when the other children in that school whose parents may have enough money for internet and a computer, they can just search on the internet to get the answer to what they need. It's a massive problem that impacts people on all ages. And it's an issue not only here in the United States, but across the world, of course. And I love some of the ways that you guys are going about and addressing that specific problem because it's not one faceted. You can't just hand a computer to somebody and say, oh, we fixed the digital divide. You have to go further. You have to teach them how to use the computer. You have to, obviously get them internet connections at some point so that they can get online. There's just a lot of facets to this that make it go around. And I think the way you guys are going about it is fantastic.
Yeah, and do you think that the post PC era is a thing that people say that is one of the things that is helping towards the misconception that is being created about the digital divide? Because people are now, because of the whole smartphone thing, they're just talking about that we're no longer in the PC era, but it's one of those things that is not going to go away for decades, even though it's being promoted as if it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely a component. I feel like for folks, they're like, well, I have a smartphone. I do everything on my smartphone. And that's not true. I cannot type an email. I couldn't get the questions, for this interview from you all if you had to type them on a phone. I can't even type a long text message. I hate it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And it's not that I can't. I mean, there's a young woman whose story I love who got her FreeGeek computer, and she was like I think a freshman in high school at the time. And when we asked people what they're going to use their FreeGeek computer for, and she cried and she said, I can't wait to do my homework.
Yep.
And
wow.
We said, oh, okay. And she said, I've been typing my term papers on my cell phone.
Yep.
Imagine typing 10 pages on a cell phone. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely miserable. And I think a lot of people are having that experience. And, I hope that at some point we're in a post-PC society, but we're not there yet. And we have a long way to go. So,
yeah.
For sure. One of the missions that I liked about FreeGeek is to reduce e-waste. So can you tell our audience why e-waste is a concern that needs to be addressed?
I mean, I think there are multiple parts to this. I feel like one, there are really precious resources that are inside of your computer.
Right.
So there are precious metals. There are also really harmful chemicals. And for us, it's really about working with the abundance that's around us in order to better serve our community. So instead of thinking of it as waste, we think of it as a resource, right? Mm-hmm. So this computer that I have might not be useful to me, but the reality is there are more smartphones in the world than there are people. There are more devices in the world than there are people. We should be able to use those devices to connect folks. So that's one component of it. But the other thing that happens with e-waste that's really unfortunate is frequently we have organizations that kind of pretend to recycle e-waste. And then it gets sent to countries where there are fewer restrictions on e-waste. And really terrible things happen where folks are tearing apart computers for the precious metals that are inside. Maybe they're touching circuit boards trying to get at gold with their hands, and it's getting into the water. It's causing disease. I feel like that is a huge issue. And people frequently tell me, oh, e-waste isn't a problem anymore. We've solved that issue. And every day we hear of some recycler who isn't doing their due diligence, isn't following the stream down. And we really find that items are still going into, landfill, into people's backyards, essentially, and are leaching into the water and into the soil and really causing a lot of harm.
So how do you battle that? I mean, you must obviously do your due diligence to get your partners that you work to, but then do you have like people who go round and spot check? Let's see, do these guys actually get rid of it properly?
So there's this really wonderful organization called BAN that actually puts trackers in devices. I don't know if you've ever watched any of their videos, but they're fascinating. And we love that they do that. Because we have to kind of trust a certain number of partners. We audit everybody and we're audited as well. But you do have to kind of like follow the stream, right? And so what BAN does is they hide little GPS tracking devices in machines, and then they follow them to their destination. And you'll find some really, really amazing places that these things go.
Wow.
The other cool thing that happens is we have this brilliant guy on staff who cares very deeply about e-waste. And he studies everything, builds a lot of partnerships with people. And he can track like from the metal, like from when it comes in our door to the final output when it's a commodity. So he's not tracking it until it like leaves the US. He's tracking it until the wires become copper again and are resold on the market. So I think that that's a really important thing, is watching the end to end on it and seeing that those items are actually being, melted down, where they're being melted down and where they're being sold, because that can really tell you a lot about the supply chain.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is seeing how many computers are being built that contribute to this idea of e-waste. They're built in such a proprietary way that they, in Linux, this is where Linux comes in a lot and helps, that they purposefully basically make them worthless because they stop supporting the software on it. They solder everything onto the board. Oh, did you have a cough there?
Oh,
Mike?
sorry. Oh, sorry. It was just a random cough that happened. Sorry.
I thought I heard Apple there, but maybe not. Maybe it was just a cough. But it's interesting that so many companies are doing this. And I think as consumers, those of us who can afford to go out and get new computers, I think it's an important question that people should be asking is this something that's actually upgradable? Is it made to be basically thrown away or thrown into the garbage once it dies? Because you're absolutely right. There are precious metals that people mine all around the world in terrible conditions to build these machines, which is a problem in itself. But once it's there, if it's just meant to be thrown in the garbage, and I get so many computers from people who are like, hey, my husband's just going to throw this in the trash. Do you want it? Yes, I want it. But that's the natural response, is just to throw it away, because it's $200 or $300 to repair it, or go to a shop would be $150 probably minimum. So you can't repair it. And instead of giving it away to an organization like you, they throw it in the trash. And that to me is just, it's such a terrible waste, but it's something we should all be conscious of when we're purchasing something. Is are these companies purposefully making devices that are meant to be basically thrown away with all this precious metals? With that said, what are some ways FreeGeek is helping to reduce the e-waste? What are some of the things you do in the organization specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, it obviously starts with our model. So when I think of FreeGeek, I like to think that we take in used technology, refurbish that technology, and out folks who need it. So it's kind of a circular model instead of this kind of linear, computer goes to end user throws the computer in a landfill. Yeah. We kind of create a full loop, which makes a big difference. But I wish I could just take you on a tour of FreeGeek right now.
That would be awesome.
So what we do is when technology comes into the building, we assess that technology and we say, okay, this part of this computer is reusable, this part is not reusable by us, or this is completely obsolete. Right. And then we recycle it down to its base components using volunteer labor. We also have 50 staff people, but what they're primarily doing is kind of leading those volunteers to help us recycle it. And then those volunteers in turn will earn a free laptop or desktop of their choosing.
Nice.
So the other thing that we do is we try to reuse as much as possible. So that giant bin of cables that one of you has behind you.
Noah.
We all have that in our house, right? So sometimes folks have devices that might need that cable in order to be functional, or maybe they just need that cable. So we kind of take everything apart and put it back together. So, say you have an extra aux cable. You could buy an aux cable in our store for like 50 cents to $1. Say you have a charger for a certain phone, an Apple iPhone, perhaps.
Right.
That's proprietary. We have those because people recycle them with us. So we hold on to those things and use as much as possible. But I think reuse is really the key. So trying to get those devices that are extra devices into the hands of folks who need them. And we also try to be at the forefront of, legislative efforts like right to repair, trying to make sure that just what you said, obsolete devices aren't being created so that, in 2 years, your Apple laptop or your Chromebook aren't having to be recycled immediately. We can actually create some longevity with devices. So.
You mentioned something that's really fascinating that I'm on just the beginning of learning about is this rights to repair situation. Mm-hmm. So if I understand the problem here, so that the community can kind of start researching this, basically some companies make it difficult, if not impossible, to officially be allowed to be a repair shop for certain devices. And what this does is limit the amount of choice that somebody has who has acquired one of these devices to actually get it repaired in an official shop without spending massive amounts of money or traveling or trying to find a shop that can officially repair it. And or making sure that another issue I understand in this is that they keep the design documents proprietary so that nobody knows the type of chips or solutions that they're using inside the components. So there's no way to find replacements to actually repair something that's a simple solder job because they don't publish any of those documents. Is there anything additional in that? Did I cover that well to your best of your knowledge?
Yeah, I think for me, the truth always comes out in like these stories, right? So we regularly have people come into our tech support department and they are experiencing difficulties with technology. And one of my favorite stories that happened was somebody brought in a cell phone and they said, my cell phone just stopped working. It won't charge anymore. We don't know what's happening. And so one of our techs opened the phone up and realized that it was like a little watch battery, one of those little tiny flat batteries that had died. Everything else with the phone was perfectly fine. And we were able to replace that battery for a person for, $1. Right. Not a big deal. When the company that manufactures that phone realized that people were doing that, they started gluing the batteries in.
Oh, wow. That's
and
awesome.
I think this happens over and over again. I got really frustrated. I had a phone recently that I had to replace because the company that made it wouldn't support it anymore. And I think that happens really frequently as well. So it's not just that you can't get it repaired by anyone but the company who manufactured it. It's also that at a certain point, they just stop repairing the devices for you, which makes them obsolete, inherently makes them obsolete. Yeah. So right to repair for us is something that isn't a huge impact on us yet, but is becoming more and more of an impact on us. So you mentioned Apple earlier, and I'm sure we'll probably have to edit this out so we don't get sued.
We'll just put in our opinion.
Yeah,
there you go. Now you're safe.
Our opinion. Yeah. We really deal frequently with devices that are Apple devices that cannot be repaired because there's some sort of proprietary lock, or we have to reverse engineer a computer that's exactly the same in order to learn. So we need like 15 of the same computer in order to rebuild one device. Yeah, it's a challenge. We had recently trained a bunch of folks to do the Master Tech repair classes. And in order to prepare for that class, we had to purchase 6 identical phones so that we could break those identical phones so that we could then have phones for them to repair. And we knew what was inside of them and how to not break them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So just to sort of sidestep this slightly, is this rights to repair a philosophical belief, or is there any sort of legislature that might be coming out to prevent these manufacturers from deliberately doing this?
So there are legislative efforts. Similarly to, I think in 2013, there were things that happened with automobile right to repair. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of modeled a bill off of that, and several states are trying to pass legislation. And it hasn't hit a huge peak interest yet. I think we'll get there eventually. We've just really started we introduced in Oregon last year. We won't reintroduce this year because it's a short session, but we'll reintroduce it the following year. But essentially, if one state approves the bill, then all states will follow suit because they'll have to publish the repair documents, and then they'll have to make OEM parts available, and they'll have to make licensing available for fixing their devices. So,
like most things, though, if you do some research on this is being fought. There's some really great footage on YouTube about Boston State doing some legislation around this or doing some hearings around it. And it's very interesting. There's a lot of company representatives from some of these well-known companies coming in and basically trying to block some of this legislation, right? And making cases against the ability for right to repair, because what if, we got to protect people. So what if somebody did that repair wrong and you'd have a broken phone, or they just come up with some random things to throw in there. So make no mistake, like most things, there's a lot of money being made in this kind of throwaway culture we have. And these companies, a lot of companies are not interested in allowing this legislation to go through with rights to repair. So it's a very important cause to get involved with. And I'm really happy to hear FreeGeek is, doing their part in it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And staying on board with it.
Yeah, there's such a ridiculous situation with other things. Like it's not even just like devices, and there's actually an issue with some tractor companies where when you purchase a tractor, you don't even own that tractor. You are licensed, like you just get the license to use the tractor, and you have no right to repair or fix anything at all. And you have to go to that particular company's repair shop in order to do it. And like that's one of the like original right to repairs thing, like kind of like latched onto that because they're like, you have like no ownership whatsoever. And it's just like the level that these companies are going to like ensure that there is as much wasteful resources as possible is just, it's kind of insane, really. So it's when like having an organization like FreeGeek that's actually, putting effort into trying to stop it is a fantastic thing. So thank you very much for that.
We have to do it in order to survive. So
yep.
Yes. Happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And so speaking of other things that FreeGeek is doing, you're doing like an educational and computer literacy issue, like educational programs and stuff like that to solve parts of the literacy as far as computer goes and that kind of thing. So tell us about those educational programs that you're doing.
Yeah, so we have a number of programs. One of my favorites is called Welcome to Computers. And what we do is we kind of work with other local nonprofits who've identified folks who, maybe don't know what a computer is, have never touched a mouse in their life, have never used a keyboard. And we identify these folks, and then we provide translation into 8 languages. We provide food and childcare. And then we teach 6 to 8 weeks of classes, depending on what the students need. Sometimes it's only 4 weeks if students are a little bit more computer literate. And then at the end of that class session, they get their own laptop to take home with them.
Nice.
A really fun example of this has actually been an organization called Transition Projects that works with the folks experiencing homelessness. And what they've been doing is trying to hire folks who've experienced homelessness. And they realized that there was a gap in their staff of folks who had been hired, because obviously they understand the issues of homelessness. If you've experienced it, you understand it.
Right.
But they didn't have the basic technical skills to get by. And so we were able to come in and help teach those programs and then provide them with home computers so they could practice those skills that then helps them keep a job. So it gets pretty cool. But that's one program. There are many, many others. Some serve K through 12 students, and we kind of try to meet people wherever they're at.
Yeah, it's something that we take for granted, right? I grew up around computers. My dad owned a computer shop, so I was lucky enough that computers were part of my life my entire childhood, which, for my generation was unusual. Today's generation, it's not as all. A lot of kids are around it. But I remember back then we did a series of community computer tutoring things, and we had people come in, and my dad asked me to teach the first class, and I told everyone, pick up your mouse and move your cursor to this icon. And I saw some individuals literally picking up their mouse and hitting it on the screen. And this just shows you that we take this for granted, right? Like you move your mouse cursor over here, you click it, and it does the thing we want. But I didn't realize I have to start from the very beginning of what all of this stuff is. I just took it for granted that I knew this because I grew up with it. And there's a lot of people who don't have that. And in the workplace today, you pretty much have to have some computer skills. I know a lot of my friends who are in construction and things along those lines are telling me now it's a part of their job when they need to fill out job requests, when they need to put notes on what has happened in the job. It's all done through the computer. And I've had to do courses with them as well. So every single job out there is now requiring some component of having a computer. And you taking the time to teach people that is just a resource that will be with them for the rest of their life. That's going to help them everywhere, which is just incredible.
We're really happy to do it. It's for me, it touches. I grew up in a rural area without much digital access, and I remember going off to college. First getting to college was hard because we don't file applications online. Right. It's a whole different world. But I didn't really know how to type when I entered college. I had taken like one typing class, and I didn't have a home computer. I didn't have a laptop either. So the learning curve was steep. And it definitely took me a lot longer to get through school. It took me a lot longer to find meaningful employment. It took me a lot longer to do a lot of things than does most folks. So it is a basic skill that we all need. And I think digital access is becoming a right instead of a privilege.
Absolutely.
So digital access, digital divide, it's all great. And of course, we all want people to have computers. But those computers are basically useless unless they have Linux. So tell us how Linux and open source has, I'm sure, completely enabled this entire project to exist. I'm sure that's what you're going to say.
Yes. So awesome. Almost all of our computers have Linux on them.
Yes.
We absolutely love Linux because it allows us to have a free and open source operating system that is able to be installed on a lot of computers that wouldn't be able to be refurbished otherwise. And it kind of adds to the longevity of a machine's life. So whereas an Apple machine might only last for so long, if we have a Linux-based PC, we can kind of update that machine.
Yeah, you can.
Kind of ad nauseum. And we really appreciate that. I mean, it makes everything possible. Also, the software programming that's available for folks. If you have to pay for Word and you have to pay for Excel and then you're paying for Photoshop and you're paying for all these things, that becomes another point at which people can't afford to engage. And so being able to teach classes that show people that they don't need to pay, that they can find free services that will really help them is life-changing to our participants. And I think we have a lot of folks who used to tell us, oh, we really want a Windows machine. Windows is super important to us. We did all the work to make Windows available. And what we're finding is, yeah, some people really, really need Windows, but most people come back to us and say, I think Linux works better.
Yep.
So
that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, we have a really, really fantastic relationship with Linux. And I think for us, we're really proud to be a part of a movement that empowers people to kind of take control of their own devices and take control of their learning and take control of their experience on a computer. So
what distro are you guys using? What I mean, I'm sure it probably varies depending on the person's needs, but if you have somebody comes in and they say, I'm a college student, I need XYZ, I mean, what does that computer go out the door with by default?
That is a really good question. Straight over my head.
Okay.
Ubuntu, probably.
No, I think we're using Linux Mint.
Okay.
Okay.
And I know I have on the website, we have like basic specs for our computers, but in general, again, I am slow to technology. So
Linux Mint is good. Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's one of the ones that we've talked about many times as a good distro for beginners out there and it has that Windows like feel. So if anybody had any prior experience at all, it kind of has that similar view, and at least with the Cinnamon desktop when you first come on and things like that. So I think this is a really interesting point that you hit on, because when you talk about the software in Linux and the cost when you're in another operating system for that software, it is a massive barrier, but not just for just everyday people who are just trying to get a job and those things, but also think about the arts. Kids and those growing up that want to be musicians, that want to be artists, that want to do something in the arts world that they have no ability to afford. Their family has no ability to afford this software to be able to try to do recordings, to try to do art programs or build anything. They have this beautiful creative mind, no outlet for it because they can't afford it. Open source comes in and says, hey, we're going to give you this software for free. It costs you nothing. It has many of the same features, in many cases more than the alternatives out there. It's a huge game changer. It's almost like you couldn't have done this program without having open source available out there. And I think that's one of the things that drew me in and has kept me in the open source world, is the fact that, from the arts perspective as well, it gives so many people an opportunity to do things they otherwise would have no ability to do.
This point is so meaningful.
Yep.
I just want to ask a follow-up question. How has the community support been? When you go out and let's say a piece of software maybe doesn't work quite the way it's expected, or you find a need that a user has and they come to you and say, hey, this laptop is great, but this one thing doesn't work. Are you working at all with the community to try to improve the ecosystem as a whole as it relates to your needs?
Yeah, so Plug is a local group that we work with, and actually it's hosted at our site. And a number of other Linux user groups. Many of our staff belong to them and try to participate really actively, because there are needs that arise regularly where we can say, hey, this is what a digitally divided person is experiencing. It's maybe different than what you're experiencing. Can we work together to make something happen? And so I think that feedback loop is so integral to making this whole thing work. That's my experience for sure.
And Plug is Portland Linux Unix group.
Yep.
One of our patrons posted in there. So you guys are based out of Portland, Oregon. I know there are some other organizations that I think have a similar name, if not the same as FreeGeek, but we're dealing with the Portland, Oregon, obviously, version there to clarify for everybody.
FreeGeek actually started in Portland about 20 years ago. And we, for years and years, gave our name away to anybody who had the same exact model as us or close enough. We said you could take it, do what you will, serve the community.
It's very open source of you.
It was very open source of us. We have since decided that there are some risks there that we don't really want to accept, but we do love that we have other free geeks throughout the country and actually throughout the world. So
awesome.
Nice. But are you primarily then helping people in Portland, Oregon, or is it the whole of the US, or does it spread further than that?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a way to share this with you, but I have a really cool interactive Google map that can show you kind of everyone that we've served as a Portland location. And we are trying, and it's worldwide, but we are actually trying to become more hyper-local and then letting other organizations that do similar work to us serve their communities, because we find that we can't be very efficient, serving people in Uganda.
Right.
We're not there. So we're trying to do a really good job of showing up in groups like AFTR, that's AFTRR. It's an association for nonprofit technology refurbishers, and trying to share our best practices, things that we've learned so that other groups can learn and also we can learn from them. So we try to engage in that really actively, but mostly Portland. And I'll share that map with you. And if you all edit and want to put it up on the screen, you can.
Absolutely.
That'd be brilliant. One of the things that people like to see is the human side of all of this geekiness. So have you got, what's some of your favorite stories that have happened where you think, woohoo, this was a real success?
Yeah. I try really commonly, because part of my job is sharing stories with people to connect with the stories. And I feel like it always makes doing my job feel worthwhile.
Yeah.
One of my very favorite stories was this sweet, sweet young lady named Lenore, who through our Plug into Portland program, she was a 10-year-old at the time I talked to her. She received a free FreeGeek computer, and I called and interviewed her, and we talked for like 30 minutes, and she told me all about what her experience had been not having a home computer and not being able to access her homework and actually being sent home with different homework, and how that made her feel really left out, because a lot of what students are doing online is engaging with each other. But also she had to take home like a special binder every day. And I don't know, as a free lunch kid, I remember not wanting to tell the lunch people that I was a free lunch kid. So I can only imagine a binder is super embarrassing. But she shared with me that now her homework is much more interactive. She also shared with me that she loves sharing her computer with her family because they didn't have a computer.
Nice.
And she told me over the phone, she said, Hilary, there's this really exciting world out there, and now I get to be a part of it. And of course, 5 minutes in, I was crying. But horrible.
Yeah, I'm fighting it right now. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really sweet. And then this other story that I love is this woman named Batula, and Batula was a part of our Welcome to Computers program, and she was referred to us by an organization called Metro East. She's a Somali refugee, and she had come to the United States and had no technical skills. We were able to provide her with a computer and basic skills. And Batula now translates for us for our Welcome to Computers classes as a paid translator. And she helps teach computer classes at the library. And she's a really magical story too. So.
It's amazing. So I know, I know what everybody's thinking right now is, how do I get involved? Because this is obviously clearly an amazing organization. And like Zeb said at the beginning, we pulled our community when we decided to make a network of all of these shows. We knew we had this massive audience and we wanted to do something with that audience for good. And we wanted an organization that allowed people to contribute in many different ways, not just financially, but also other ways as well. And FreeGeek was the one that the community came and recommended that we picked. And so we have set up a page for individuals who wish to contribute financially, because that's always important, having the funds to do these new programs and extend out. However, there are additional ways for people to get involved. For those who are interested, you can donate hardware. And if you're in the Portland, Oregon area, they could also reach out and potentially volunteer there as well to help out in the area. But I guess besides of the financial donations, could you go into a little bit about the hardware donation and the volunteering options that are available?
Yeah, so we will take any of your hardware. We love to either recycle or refurbish it, but right now we have a really big need for laptops. So if you have extra laptops sitting around, we've had to
Michael,
slow down some of Michael.
Look at that. I bet you're drooling over there looking at his background, because look at all those laptops.
Yeah, they're currently just part of my set, but they could totally be shipped off to FreeGeek too.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we have a really big need for laptops. We've actually been running out every month because we're providing so many. So laptops are one of our big needs. You can also support us by shopping our store. So half of what FreeGeek receives we sell, and the other half we give away. So if you purchase things that are refurbished through FreeGeek, that is a really huge way that you can support us that also benefits you. Our stuff is typically very low priced and very high quality, so I would encourage that. The other thing that you can do is volunteer. So we have many opportunities to volunteer recycling, but the thing that I would suggest, especially to this audience, is consider becoming an educator for FreeGeek. We provide teacher trainings. We really, really need teachers all the time. The more teachers we have, the more education we can provide. So those are the ways that I would love to have you all get involved. You can, follow us on social media, see what we're doing. All of those things are wonderful ways to engage, but volunteer, donate technology. Cash is always helpful. Send us your laptops, please.
Because there's a lot of people here who love to teach and educate. Is that something that is more for those who are in the Portland, Oregon area, or can anybody get involved in the teaching aspect of it?
I think right now it's primarily in the Portland metro area, but what I would say is connect with our education department. You can just email education@freegeek.org, and we will happily try to connect you so that at some point you can help us reach folks. And it might mean that we connect you with an organization that's closer to you. And we're also working on eventually having some online programming, making that possible. So if people want to help us make that a possibility, we would love the assistance. So again, we try to work with the abundance that's around us in order to serve our community best.
Fantastic.
So you've already said about the kind of hardware you wanted in the sense of like the laptops and that kind of thing, but we have a very large audience that is all around the world. How do they get the laptops to you? How do they send the hardware to FreeGeek?
So what I would do is reach out to donations@freegeek.org if you need logistical help, but you can mail anything to our address, which is on our website, and we will accept technology donations. Also, if you want to get connected to an organization that's closer to you to give laptops to them because maybe it's logistically simpler for you, we'd be happy to help with that as well. And you can email me and I will help you do that. And you can email me at giving@freegeek.org. It's probably the easiest way to get to me.
Perfect. And I noticed some patrons were asking maybe they could get their companies to donate their hardware once they're done with them that work for bigger organizations. Is that, if they were to arrange something like that, would they just email you at the giving email address to set it up with their corporation, perhaps, to donate their extra hardware?
Yeah, it's a really, actually, corporate donations are probably the most meaningful donations. And I appreciate whoever in your audience said that because it makes, I forgot to say it, made my life easier. So corporate donations for us can be reused at an almost 80% rate, whereas individual donations are about 20% because, hair of 1,000 cats, whatever exists in your closet is getting into your computer, and IT departments and corporations maintain devices better, and they start with better devices typically. So for us, that's super meaningful. And if you connect with me at giving@freegeek.org, I am happy to work with your logistics people. We have some folks on staff who do that specifically that can help get the logistical things in place so that we will get the computers and it won't cost the company a bunch of money to send them to us.
Perfect.
So, Hilary, thank you so much for joining the show and for all the important work you're doing. If there was one final message that you would want to get out to our listeners, what would that be?
Oh, man. Big question, Zeb. I think if there were one final message, first, I would want it to be, I hope you all feel the gratitude that I have for you choosing to support FreeGeek and wanting to be a part of the work that we're doing. And please get involved in your community because the digital divide is everywhere. It's impacting a lot of people, more folks than you realize. Talk about it, connect with people about it, and see how you can help where you are because it's definitely impacting your neighbors, your friends, people around you.
And I just want to read one of our patrons' messages here that typed in. It said, FreeGeek is awesome. As someone who grew up in low income, I can appreciate organizations who help like this. I'm going to put the word out at my college about FreeGeek. Maybe they'll get some more hardware. So definitely love that it is, reaching so many people already in our audience. And this is just such a great organization. And can't thank you enough for working with us because you reached back out to us and helped us put all this stuff together, very well organized and everything else. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Someone said you can buy FreeGeek gear on eBay, I think.
You can. We have 2 eBay sites.
Nice.
That's how you do your sales, yeah?
It's a part of how we do our sales. We also have a storefront, and that's actually the biggest area of sales for us.
Is that how people can, if they're not in the area, they can purchase hardware from it through eBay?
Yep,
Okay.
they can.
Cool.
And that is a huge support to us. So my job is essentially to find all of our technology and all of the cash donations, but we support ourselves. So I always think of FreeGeek as 50-50, 50-50. So if you think about the way that we make income, it's half earned income and half donated income. And then if you think about the way that we break up our technology, we give away half of it and we sell half of it.
Nice.
And it's almost worked out perfectly like that. So
Cool. And you can find out more information about donating to FreeGeek as part of the Destination Linux community by going to destinationlinux.network. We're going to hold lots of fun events on the network to help raise awareness and do our part to help with these important issues. You can find more information on our website and Discourse forums.
A new version of the popular pen testing OS Kali Linux is now out. The version has a standout features and includes an undercover mode that you can enable to look like you're running Windows OS on your laptop to fool anyone that's trying to look over your shoulder. Kali has also switched away from GNOME as their default DE and moved to XFCE. The reasons quoted are performance issues, fractured user experience with all the various devices Kali supports, from low end to ARM-based, as the UI was different from the one with GNOME. Finally, they wanted a modern-looking theme. New features include a new GTK3 theme for both GNOME and XFCE. Kali documentation has a new home and is now on Git-powered. Public packaging, getting your tools into Kali. ButterFS during setup.
See that?
Added PowerShell. The kernel has been upgraded to 5.3.9 and plus the normal bug fixes. I have to tell you, does this episode really start to come together? Yeah. We talk a lot about what distro to use, what desktop environment to use. And the truth is there are different desktop environments that are suited for different things. So for example, if you want the best daily driver desktop environment is undisputedly KDE. Undisputedly. Nobody would disagree with that at all. Right, guys? So, but when you start to look at utilitarian type stuff, like I want a computer to do a task, KDE is no longer a great choice. It's okay. It's just there's a lot of knob switches and levers that you have to pull in the right order to get your job done. And as they so eloquently point out in the article, like when you are running it on everything from a 15-year-old ThinkPad to a brand new Samsung, whiz bang, whatever. It's nice to have something that's going to provide a consistent performance and consistent presentation to the user. And how you get that is with a very pared down, very basic, very simplistic desktop environment like XFCE. So I think it's a really, really fantastic choice because I really think it fits the model they're going for. The only downside is, if you're using it as a daily driver, and not that people should be using Kali as a daily driver, but if you do, XFCE to me is not a great desktop for day-to-day stuff because it's missing a lot of the fundamental functionality that I think people have come to expect with the modern desktop environment, like functionality of the super key. It's a hack to get that to work in XFCE. So I think they made a really good choice, and I'm glad to see that this distro continues to get as much attention as it has. Man, has that been helpful in testing cameras and networks and switches and seeing what smart devices are communicating. Gosh, do I love Kali. I mean, it's just really great. And is Arch Assault still around?
Well, I think Black Arch is. Yeah, Black Arch.
Black Arch. So if you're into Kali, if you haven't played with this stuff before, you should definitely check out Kali Linux. Download it and take a look. And while you're giving those things a spin, just to please Ryan, you should also give Black Arch a spin too. Kind of the same thing, except with the mentality of, hey, let's keep it really, really up to date. And when you're doing security and penetration testing, that's actually a really important thing, right?
So it's funny you bring that up. I was playing with Black Arch yesterday, and I personally, on the machine I was using, they use Fluxbox as their desktop environment. And basically, it's like OpenBox, where you right click to get your menu on a empty desktop, and then they have a list of tools down there like subjects. And so as you're scrolling through the subjects, there are so many tools in Black Arch that if you accidentally scroll to one of them that has, and there's several of them, 500 or so tools, it takes over your whole screen with the menu of all of these tools. And it's just not organized well. Whereas when you go into Kali, you want to run it as a daily driver. I mean, the first time I boot, until Michael told me, you're not supposed to use this as a daily driver, I wanted to use it as a daily driver. I'm like, it's beautiful. The menus make sense. Everything's organized. It tells you what the tools do. There is another one that I've been playing with that I think is also worth mentioning here, which is Parrot OS. And to me, in playing, because I'm getting into some of these books are taking me through some of these pen testing and tools and things that I've been reading lately, Parrot seems even more new user friendly than Kali. Now, all of them are good tools. So I'm just telling you from my experience as somebody getting new into this, that Parrot had the most organized feel to me that I was able to run the easiest. And they also have, I believe it's called OVPN setups for Kali, for Parrot and Black Arch, where if you want to run this in a virtual box, you can basically import that, and it sets the whole virtual box up for you, including setting up the network and everything up, all the pre-configs for any of these. But not to take away from Kali, this is what every time Bo Weaver comes to our lug group, he boots up his laptop, it's Kali Linux. He does use it as a daily driver. He just removes the root account as having,
he uses it as a daily driver because he actually is a pen tester, which makes sense.
That's what he does for a living. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So it's fine to use a daily driver for Kali if that's your job. Otherwise, don't do it because they specifically say.
I don't know if I agree with that. I would obviously, it's a discussion probably more suited to having with Bo directly, but there are tools that are built for specific jobs like Kali, but you have to understand, like, Kali does some very interesting things as far as capturing network interfaces and enabling promiscuous mode and things that we have intentionally turned off on the day-to-day things because you don't want to have those things on when you're connecting to public Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So, if you have a very specific reason and you understand those risks and either accept them or are mitigating them, then I can kind of see it. But I'd hesitate to send the message that, if you're a security professional, that's what it is. It's a distro for daily drivers for security testers. No, it's kind of like taking the operating system that runs on the little Fluke cable tester and being like, hey, I can install SSH and I could use this as a daily driver. Okay, maybe you can. It's really not best practice.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily saying that they should. It's just like if you are in a position where that's your job, it makes sense that you would. So that's up to you if you want to do that. But the Kali Linux, just to clarify, the Kali Linux team says that it's not meant for daily drivers.
Right.
So don't do it unless if you're prepared to deal with it. feel free to do that if you want.
If you're a pen tester, what you should do is either dual boot the machine, run it in a VM, or run it. What I do, run it on a dedicated computer specifically for penetration testing. God knows you don't want to take your personal laptop and put it in the kind of situations that you put a laptop in that you're going to try and beat on. So
absolutely.
It is.
I would just give one very safe caveat here. If you don't know what you're doing, don't start playing with some of these tools, because you could get yourself into some serious trouble by inadvertently getting onto a network that you weren't supposed to do just because this tool could do it. Just be very wary.
Yes. Yeah. If you're going to do it, have the permission and have a written signed contract that you're going to penetration testing on that network. And if you don't have that, do it on your own LAN. Don't.
And if you're just learning, do it on your own LAN. Don't even get a contract, because that could end very badly.
Yes, that'll get you sued.
Yeah.
It'll get you put in jail. We talked about that on Ask Noah too. There's people that have been put in jail even with a signed contract now.
Yeah. There are so many great tools within here, but you do need to know what you're doing. You can take it along with some courses or some books and things, and all of those books, at least that I've read, all talk about doing things on your own LAN. So it's much safer in which tools to use and when. But I love that Kali Linux keeps making the stuff that they work on just fits so perfectly with what they're doing, like the Windows mode. And if you look at it, it's near perfect. You basically click on it, and even when it's not one of those things where it just puts up a wallpaper. Even when you go into the file system in this Windows mode, it looks like File Explorer and stuff like that as you're going through. So, pen testers, part of their job sometimes is to go into a place and pretend to be an employee so they can get access into the ports or things where they can plug other devices in. And so obviously if, Bo walks in there and has a machine with Kali Linux on it, even people who just maybe watch Mr. Robot would be like, hey, wait a minute, that's a hacking operating system. But Windows, nobody hacks on Windows. So, it's just cool stuff that they put in here. I love Kali.
So on to some more OS news, and we had some feedback from the community that we supposedly missed reporting Elementary OS 5.1 being released. However, when we produced the show last week, i.e. last Sunday, it hadn't been released yet. But now it has, and so we're happy to report on it. It's been eagerly awaited by everybody who loves Elementary, and I'm sure it's also been eagerly awaited by the naysayers to say, has it got any better or is it still unusable? But it's one of those sort of Marmite situations. You either love it or you hate it.
Don't compare it to Marmite. I mean, come on. That is the most terrible substance ever made.
Marmite situation.
We're talking one of the most beautiful distros ever made versus the substance that's meant to be a gag against Americans. Because we know you don't really eat that over there. There's no way. It's a gag.
It's people who don't. Marmite is for people who don't eat it and people who pretend and say they do.
Yeah, exactly.
No, trust me, it is a well-beloved English food substance.
Sure.
So anyway,
it's a substance for sure.
News. Yeah. So Elementary OS has a new release, 5.1, named Hera or Hera. This is the first major update since Juno, released last October, and has the following enhancements. It's got a brand new first run experience with greeter and onboarding. It has Flatpak support with sideload and App Center. Major updates around accessibility and system settings. Iterative improvements across nearly all apps. The latest hardware support with a new Linux kernel and hardware enablement stack. Now, there's lots more that we could go on to talk about in the press release and the side loading of Flatpaks, but I'm more interested in would anyone here consider using this as their daily driver? And if so, why? And if so, why not?
So for me, I recommend Elementary OS, and I know they are trying to get away from this comparison, so I apologize for it, but it's just personally, when I have people I'm converting from Mac to Linux, I recommend Elementary because it just fits perfectly. It's different. I think it's better than Mac OS, and I know a lot of people like to make that comparison, and Elementary folks don't like it, but there is just similarities in its simplicity and beauty. And then elementary takes it to a whole nother level. And so I like to recommend it there. And the people who come from Mac OS into elementary fall in love nearly immediately because of how they do things. I also love how they are work so hard on bringing money into the App Center. So being able to give back to the developers and things. I know some people don't like it, that they get nagged when they go to download a piece of software that, hey, you should donate and, suggested donation amounts. I think it's brilliant. These people work on this all day long. They make these beautiful applications we use. Unfortunately, not everybody who has the financial means stops to think, I should give money to this project. And this is a nice reminder for that. So I love the things that they do here. Why do I personally not use it? It's not Arch.
and basically on the same vein, the reason I don't use it is because it doesn't have plasma. So, I mean, like it's their own particular.
The reason I don't use it is because it doesn't come pre-installed with Broche.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. I do like the fact that they have their new Flatpak support, because that's awesome. Because I think having support for Flatpak is an important thing for most distros. I do wish they actually provided the FlatHub by default as an option where you don't have to manually install it. But that's understandably why they chose to not do that, is because the FlatHub is not an official repo technically. And because they don't have because Flatpak doesn't even have an official repo, it makes it a problem to have support by default. But I think they should go ahead and do it anyway, just because the community repo of FlatHub is kind of like the de facto official, But anyway, I think it's really cool that they did add support for Flatpaks.
The thing I like about it is that the team over there at Elementary aren't afraid of breaking the mold. Now, I personally don't use it and probably wouldn't use it because I'm not into that sort of Mac-esque type use of the product. But the fact that they actually have a guideline for developers who are going to build an application to be included, that they actually say to them, well, it must fit this ethos. You must do this, and it must look like this, and it must integrate. And the fact that they've gone down that road and they've just ignored everybody shouting it and saying, oh, this is not the right way to go. They now have an unbelievably cohesive OS. And no matter where you go to it, if you can get used to that design and used to the way it works and feels, you never suddenly get that jarring shock of, oh, well, that looks different. I didn't expect to see that. Everything is just, for me, beautifully molded together, and it has a fluidity about it and a look and feel about it that is just amazing. It just doesn't fit my workflow, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's great looking. I mean, I agree with the consistency thing, but as soon as you install something that the user wants something that's not in that consistency, it does feel very out of place. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that sense.
But then that's why they make it difficult for you to do that. They don't make it impossible, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to know how to install the various components so that you can have PPSs installed, etc., or PPAs, I should say. And there's a couple of other things that they make awkward, but if you're an experienced Linux user, you can get around it. But the average person who just comes to Linux and wants to use an operating system, they're not going to worry about those sort of things because they're not going to know that it exists. So in that respect, I think they've done a fantastic job.
So this has nothing to do directly with Elementary because there are many distros that fall along this lines, but it just made me think. So the display managers for many of these, I was talking to Bo and he was going on a rant about display managers and the fact that they like to display the usernames and all of the usernames on a machine. Now, Elementary has done this new thing, which looks fabulous, where when you first log in, it has all these cards for all of the users that are in Elementary. Now, Bo's point was the reason he hates this for people's security, not this particular Elementary, but a lot of the display managers are doing this, is now he no longer has to guess your username. If he gets to be able to see your machine, he knows every single user that's on that machine, and now he just has to guess their password, which takes 50% of his work away when he's doing pen testing. I wanted to bring it back to this group to say, a lot of display managers are working to beautify their display manager and show you all of the users that are on available for you to click and just put your password. Is this an issue?
That's an interesting point because it's something I've never even thought about before. Like, yeah,
I didn't either.
it totally.
Well, the thing is, if someone like Bo can think about it, so can the crooks.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the bit that you have to be wary of. Now, you also have to ask yourself, is that particular OS going to be used in a business type environment? No disrespect to the elementary guys. Are they big enough yet to be looked at by a business to say, do you know what? I really like the way elementary looks. Let's get them in. I've got 300 users. I want them all to go across the board. Would that infrastructure be there? Or are you going to still be in the realms of Red Hat and Ubuntu and other much larger distros?
Even Ubuntu's use display managers that show the users right there. So, I mean, yeah, I think elementary number one probably is big enough, but
I think there's another perspective to think about that, though, because like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yes, it does make it a lot easier to know what the password is, what the username is. And if you changed it where you could just click a name instead of showing the name, it would just click a button to start logging in. It would be the same situation because you wouldn't have to know what the username is. But at the same time, don't we? Isn't the typical thing about security is like if there's physical access to the device, you can pretty much just kind of guarantee that they've already done it anyway.
Exactly.
So if you just
but he's not. Yeah, if he's in the building and he's walking by a bunch of machines that are locked, let's say in this environment, like you do in an enterprise, or where he can just rub his hand or move the mouse and the screen pops up with the display manager and it lists all of the users. Then he goes home to do his hack. He has a whole list of people of usernames that he could follow. So
I don't know, man. I get where you're coming from. I really do. At the same time, what's to stop him from just picking the computer up and walking out the front door? You know what I mean? Like that's Michael's point. If once you have physical access, I can put my hands on the thing. Like it all other security kind of goes out the window except for encryption.
I guess the idea is just to not have the username and maybe just have an image of saying who it is. I guess that could work. But I mean, still, I think that because of the physical access is an issue.
I want to say in Debian, I don't know what display manager they were using, but when I was playing with Debian recently, you had to put your username and password in every time. And I remember going, this is stupid and annoying. I have to put my username and password in every time. And then Bo said that, and I was like, okay, well, now I kind of see why maybe in certain environments you wouldn't want that. But there's also the factor, right?
I just having a hard time wrapping my head around it, man. So, okay, consider this, right? The screen locker. Does anybody in on the show actually trust the screen locker in Linux? Good. Because the amount of times I've pulled my laptop out of my backpack, and this is with GNOME, it's with KDE, I had it happen with XFCE, definitely had it happen on Unity. You open the screen up and it just didn't lock. If it did lock, like it flashes something real quick of something that was behind the screen. There's just all sorts of weird things that happen with the screen locker because at the end of the day, X really wasn't designed to do the things that we're doing. We just shoehorned it over 25 years into doing something, right? Yeah. So I wouldn't trust the X screen locker to begin with. In fact, side note, that's why in Tails there's actually a separate application for doing screen locking. But since I wouldn't trust that anyway, I have to side with Michael on this one. If you can put your hands on it, all bets are off to begin with. If you think that it's a modest increase in security, maybe. But basically, I would equate it to I'm running SSH on the open internet and I changed the port from 22 to 2222. And, it's like, oh, that'll stop them. Now they have to port scan,
Fair point. But not to take away from elementary. This looks like a really good upgrade. And a lot of people are talking about the beauty of elementary. And I believe Jason from Linux for Everyone is doing a bunch of testing with elementary right now, including some gaming. So if you want to know more about his take on elementary and some of the things, because I know he's kind of fallen in love with it, check out some of his content.
So in the software news this week, we actually got some interesting things about a personal finance software that got updated. If you're looking to keep better track of your finances or use an open source solution while doing so, you can check out Skrooge. And Skrooge is spelled with a K, so Skrooge, which if you haven't guessed already, it is a KDE application.
Oh, that's shocking.
That's why it's spelled with a K. Actually, I think this is one of the better times where they made the name really awesome.
Because it's Scrooge McDuck, right? That's what it's based on.
Or Ebenezer Scrooge. I don't know. What I want it to be Scrooge McDuck, so we're going to go ahead and say it is that.
Yeah.
And so Skrooge has a new version of 2.21.0, which released, and it contains a lot of bug fixes and various improvements, like supporting using categories, account, payee. These are like they've already had most of this, but they've improved the support of this, and they've also improved the dashboard readability. And they've also added support for having control. You can have you can use Skrooge as a Flatpak or an app image now, so you can use it without having to install it and deal with any kind of dependencies and that kind of thing. So that's awesome. I love every time I see a new application. It's like, hey, does it have an app image, Flatpak, or Snap? Fantastic, one of those. That's all I need. So that's awesome. And Skrooge is also like just a well-known finance tracking software. So if you want to check it out, there's a lot of tutorials about it and everything. And I wanted to see, what kind of software do you use for your financial management for everybody here on the show?
I use a web-based system called EveryDollar, and the reason that I used EveryDollar is because it allows me to plan what I'm going to spend rather than track what I already spent. Like, tracking what you already spent is kind of like getting into your car and being like, well, I ran out of gas 311 miles into my trip. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, well, you sit down before and be like, well, here's how much gas I need to make it from here to here. So I kind of treat financing the same way. And because EveryDollar is web-based, of course, it works with Linux, and then I use it on my phone. But I actually literally just installed Skrooge because I'd not heard of it, and I'm going to give it a whirl.
Nice.
And holy crap, is this interface nice. Jeez, beautiful.
I love it. Wow. That's a raving review right there. Actually, we were looking for some financial software recently to handle DLN's finances, and Skrooge was one of the top contenders in there. It was one of the first ones. When I downloaded it and played with it, I was like, okay, this is reasonable. Options out there, like I think a new money or something, and it just the interface was so. Now, if you're used to it, I'm sure it's great, and I'm sure it has tons of features and plugins and all these things people will talk about. But from somebody just trying to go to one, Skrooge was one of the better options. I also like some of the online options that are not necessarily open source, like Wave out there. And of course, the well-known QuickBooks option is out there that I've used in the past, which comes bundled with TurboTax if you do that with your taxes at the end of the year. So those are the options I've used in personal and from a business perspective.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly I've also been messing with Wave. I haven't heard of EveryDollar, so I'm interested in checking that out. But I've used Skrooge in the past, and Skrooge is kind of it's a good tool for personal finance. But if you want to look for business finance, that's why we didn't use Skrooge for the DLN, because it's not really business oriented. But it is a great personal finance application. So if you're interested in that, check it out. We actually also had this latest episode of the DLN Extend. They talked about financial software for like tax prep software. Check that out. On episode 6, they talked about a thread that was created on a DLN Discourse forum about tax prep software. So it was really interesting, and you can check out that episode as well as that thread on the forum. It's you might find some information about various different things that people do in the community try out for their personal financing. And
we have one of our patrons come in and say to check out Accounting, aka unting.com. It is open source. Jacob recommends it here and says there's also an image on DigitalOcean for it. So that's one to check out. So there are a lot of options, which is great, that we have a lot of choice there, that you could find one to fit your needs. But Skrooge is a very cool one for personal finance.
For sure.
So quick question for you guys in the States. Does every single person who works have to fill in a tax return at the end of the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a certain there's a certain level where
make,
you don't have to. Yeah.
If you are taxed less than $5,000 in the fiscal year, you still are required to submit a tax return, but you don't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also depends on the certain section of the, like there's a state requirement and there's a federal requirement, and the federal requirement I think is like 10,000.
Yep.
Well, in the UK, unless you have a particular reason where you have an accountant who's trying to use tax rules to save you money, even when I was a company director earning in excess of £70,000 a year, the government just does it, just deals with it.
Yeah, we can also put it into the thing that if you don't live in the U.S., you don't have to worry about this, because you don't have this ridiculous system of taxing that you have to deal with, because so many countries have a system where they actually tell you what you owe rather than you have to figure out what you owe. Kind of like you order a pizza and they say, guess how much you owe per pepperoni.
We'll tell you once it gets there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you get it wrong,
No. You count your pepperonis and then you send us the check. And after 15 years, if we decide, we'll just come in and show you how wrong you were, and then we'll charge you a percentage for every pepperoni you were off. That would be a little bit more accurate.
and then if you don't have the money to pay for those pepperonis, you go to jail. So yeah, it's a
True story.
Great system.
True story. We ended up getting fined by the state because we have pens. We have branded pens, and I didn't include our pens in our taxes. So we had to pay a use tax on the pens, and we didn't pay a use tax on the pens. And the state of North Dakota was very upset with me because of my pens. So I had to pay like whatever.
So let's move on to some gaming news. And for once, Ryan isn't dropping me in the mire. So I'm happy to report that Euro Truck Simulator 2, which is my favorite game, and you can see me beating up on innocent caravans over on my YouTube channel, have released a new DLC, and it's called Road to the Black Sea. And I believe that it adds a further 22 countries and umpteen number of towns, and it's just a typical Euro Truck add-on that is expanding the depth of the game, because although I play it in a very light-hearted manner and I use it totally against the way that SCS wanted it to be used, if you were to buy this game today and add all the add-ons, I guarantee you it would probably take you, I would guess, something like 2 years to cover every single road on every single map that they offer, driving at the correct speeds. And although it sounds silly, it's a driving game, it's a truck game. You try and play this game properly, and it's as equally difficult as driving a real car or a real truck in real life. In fact, it's probably a bit more difficult because the robots that they put in there do some really, really crazy things. So if you're into truck driving, or you just like a nice relaxing game where you can come along, and although the scenery isn't 100% accurate, it is, you often see landmarks that you recognize from certain parts of the country. So this expansion is adding Romania, Bulgaria and Turkey, along with some docks and industries. You get AI trains that go along the sides of the track, and you've got different types of cars, and it's just a fantastic add-on. And okay, it might be, what is it, like £13.99? It's pocket money change when you consider it up against some of these AAA games that are going to be costing you $45, $50. This is a great add-on to a great game, and if you haven't tried playing it, it's more difficult than it looks. I love it. I love it to bits.
Yep. So definitely check out Zeb's channel, and also English Bob, because you guys have an ongoing rivalry of who can put a bigger engine in their semi truck and go faster down the highways. But two channels that I am not a fan of playing this game, but I am a huge fan of watching you and EB play this game, because I could not think or be creative enough to think of all the fun stuff you guys figure out with it. But it's just a blast. It's a very cool game. That a lot of people who even drove trucks before still like to play this game, and a lot of fun with it.
And the other bit that I forgot to mention is there's a huge community in the background that are providing modifications to the game. And those are the sort of the modifications that I use, where there is no truck damage, so there's no realism in that respect. But if you rear end a car or someone rear ends you, then your cargo is going to be damaged, so you're going to get less money for doing that particular trip. But there are people out there who will have a passion for a particular truck that's not in the game, and they will go along, they'll learn how to add it all together, and you can download that modification for Euro trucks. And there's actually been people who love the American Truck Simulator who brought over the Kenworths and the other American trucks into Euro trucks, and vice versa. So not only is it a great game, but the community there is awesome.
Very cool.
So the software spotlight this week is a really cool piece of software called Pulse Effects. And essentially Pulse Effects is a tool to allow you to add a different modifications to and effects, obviously, to your Pulse audio setup for your audio in your Linux system. And it has so many things, it's really hard to describe, like list off all of them because it would take forever. But they have like one of the best things is they have a limiter, compressor, reverberation, equalizer, and auto volume effects for your Pulse audio applications. You can have different configurations for your system this way, and it allows you to have the limiter and the compressor are really, really nice because you can make sure that your audio doesn't peak too high with the limiter, and you can do compression to like get a better sound, like a more like in-depth sound when you use the compressor for this application. It's really cool if you don't have like hardware to do this kind of thing. It allows you to do it all through the software. So I think it's really cool and it's definitely worth checking out, Pulse Effects, and we'll have a link in the show notes if you'd like to check it out yourself.
If you've ever wanted to be a bash ninja, we're going to help you with that today, and it is the tab complete. Now, tab complete is the ability of your bash shell to automatically complete a command by tapping the tab key twice. And so, for example, if you're entering in a command and you double tap the command key or double tap the tab key, if the command is unambiguous, it will automatically complete the rest of that command. You can also use it for file name completion, and I use that all the time. So if I'm copying or moving a file or rsyncing a file, I'll type the first couple letters of the name and I'll hit double tap. Now, if I'm wrong and the file name is ambiguous, it will just show me a list of the available file names. And where I do this all the time is I'm writing ISOs out to flash drives for installing Linux, right? IF equals slash, I know it was CE tab. Oh yeah, that's right. CentOS blah, blah, blah. 7.5 is the one I want. Tab again, and then it completes the rest of it. It will speed up your ability to type commands tremendously. But it gets even better because you can use this inside of a script. Do this, tab, in your bash script to execute the command completion in the script yourself. Now, I have to be honest with you, I have some reservations. There's something in my mind that just doesn't like the idea of letting the computer decide what my script is going to do. Like, I think I kind of want that written out. It's the same reason I like to use full file path, but it is nonetheless a useful trick, and it is nonetheless a useful tool in the toolbox, because there are some times when perhaps, like, for example, maybe you were scripting something and you didn't know what the end of that file name was going to be, but you knew what the first part was going to be, and the second part of that was going to be dynamic. And so using tab complete inside of a script would allow you that script to complete even if the file name changes.
Yeah, what's cool about this, I think, is you could put pause commands into your bash script that then you execute, do this, and then the tab, and for you would execute that and then have a pause script for listing things out, like you were mentioning, if you're not quite sure how their file structure is. And one of the ways that I thought about utilizing this is I have an auto install script that a lot of people have liked and used and forked and things like that. But one of the things that's really difficult in updating that script is, let's say a new PIA version comes out. And so the new file name when they hit the download is PIA 235-15X, which, it adds a 5 in there. It used to be a 4. So if I hard code that into my bash script as 4, when they go download the new one, it's not going to find anything. However, if I do this with the PIA, after I type in PIA, then it automatically tabs. It's going to automatically autocomplete anything that has PIA dash for my bash script and pull that down. So I see some unique ways that you could utilize this. I think it's a pretty cool command out there to know for you bash script ninjas out there. So we want to thank each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening. However you take in Destination Linux, thank you very much for your support. We love our patrons, and we want to give a special shout out every episode to them for their incredible support. We do a live show for our patrons, so you can come and join us and be a part of the show. We also added sponsors to the mix as well. So if you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can go to sponsors and become a patron and get all of the same perks that you get on Patreon on sponsors. And we've added a bunch of new tiers with different perks out there for you to enjoy. One of those, if you can't join us on a live show, we record generally on Sundays. You still get the unedited version of the show, so you can see all of the extra conversations and things that go on, as well as some of those bloopers and things that take place, which are mostly Michael, but the rest of us mess up every now and then. In any case, you can join this for a very, very low price. It's nearly darn near free, so go check it out and consider becoming a patron of the show.
Speaking of support, become a part of the community by going to destinationlinux.network and joining our forums and our Mumble server. And by the way, while you're there over at destinationlinux.network, did you know there's a new show to listen to? That's right. It's called DLN Extend, and that's a way to listen as well. Now, that's a show where they dive into the topics of the shows. It's like a show about shows. It's like a meta show. It's a show that describes the shows. All the questions that you ask yourself when you're screaming at your computer or screaming at your car as you're driving around, that's right. These guys ask those questions, and then they bring us in when necessary. And when we don't show up to that, then they come on our shows and yell at us there. So it is the way that the Destination Linux network stays in balance. And we also have Linux for everyone. We have DOS Geek. We have This Week in Linux. We have the Ask Noah Show, Tux Digital, Zebedee Boss. If you want Linux content, destinationlinux.network is your one-stop shop to get it. So please visit us there, join our community, and tell us what a great job we do. Negative email can be sent to Michael at destinationlinux.network.
That's correct.
So please get back to us and provide feedback or ask any questions you may have. There are numerous methods that you can do this. Email is comments@destinationlinux.org. Unless it's a complaint, in which case it's michael@destinationlinux.org.
Exactly.
Our Telegram group, Discord, Discourse, Twitter, Mastodon, and so many other ways that you'd be amazed at what Michael has been able to find for us and give you a way to talk to us. That will be on the destinationlinux.org contact page. So please keep them comments coming and questions. We love to read them. We love to hear of ways that we can improve the show. Just don't ask Michael to create any more scenes. Finally, don't forget to join our Mumble server, chat with the community, set up gaming sessions, and enjoy networking with us.
If you want more content, the fun doesn't stop here. We also have our own channels you can check out. So, for example, you can go to Ryan's content at youtube.com/DOSGeek, where he fills your brains on hardware, software, and all things Linux. You can check out Zeb at youtube.com/ZebedeeBoss, where he'll show you all the new stuff and the what's the Onto the Black Sea, something like that, for the DLC for the Euro Truck Simulator game on his Zebedee Gaming YouTube channel. You can check out my content at tuxdigital.com, where I do an in-depth weekly Linux Canoes podcast called This Week in Linux and other Linux-related content. You can check out Noah on the Ask Noah Show, where he does a weekly talk radio show at 6 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. You can join him and call in and ask any kind of questions you want at theasknoahshow.com. And, of course, be sure to like that smash button and share the show on social media.
So everybody have a great week. And remember that the journey your old laptop takes should take it to that FreeGeek destination.
Nice. Thanks, everyone. See, we weren't too bad. I mean, Michael was embarrassing, but that's normal for us. But everyone else was right on point.
Yeah. They always like to mess with me because they just have to talk, and I have to keep track of editing everything and talk. So they don't.
Yeah,
get that violin out.
That's very personal. This is pretty fun. It's not a bad way to wake up and deal with in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, great! I get to wake up and do an interview at 10 a.m.
And my favourite part of the whole interview was you threatening to clap. That was just awesome.
Yeah, that.
2 seconds, Michael.
Thinking about my edit points. You're so nice.
There you think.
All right, appreciate that completely worthless, no need to clap thing. Yep, good job. Anyway. Did Hilary just clap?
Yes, and I'll record.
Absolutely brilliant.
Roll out of 10.
I love it. All right.